This video is sponsored by Squarespace. I'm not really one to do Warhammer news videos anymore, mostly because I usually don't have a lot to say. But with the most recent Warhammer preview from the past weekend at the Warhammer World Championships, I really just found there was a lot I wanted to discuss, a lot of things that were either interesting to me or just innovative in general for the company, stuff we haven't seen before. So today, I thought I would just make a quick video breaking down all of my thoughts on the presentation, all of the reveals that interested me, and just so you know, there won't be a lot of fancy editing in this one. I want to get it out as quickly as possible, so feel free to just listen to this one like a podcast if you want. Okay, so just to start out, we got a massive reveal showing us pretty much everything from the new Warhammer Quest game, Darkwater, which, to be quite honest, from the few glimpses we saw of this before the show, I wasn't all that interested in. Like a lot of people, I've still got a bad taste in my mouth from the release of Cursed City. However, in this preview, I think they really sold me on how cool this game looks. I think they've done a great job at pitching a classic fantasy, or at least classic Warhammer fantasy style of dungeon crawler that I think would be appealing to people even outside of the AOS fandom, or maybe even outside of the Warhammer fandom. But then if you are an AOS fan, or in my case, sort of a lapsed AOS fan, there's all kinds of little touches here that make it a cool fleshing out of that setting. Like the cool shape-shifting hero, the Kurnothi hero, or just the general update of the AOS Nurgle aesthetic, which I think was really successful here. They didn't give us too much to go on in terms of the actual gameplay. Maybe they revealed that earlier on Warhammer Community, I don't remember. But just based on the design of the miniatures and the art alone, I think they've done a good job at selling this product to three different demographics. Number one being obviously the dungeon crawler fans, people who are into Warhammer Quest, or things like Hero Quest, things like that. But number two, I think they're well aware of this demographic, otherwise Warhammer Underworlds wouldn't still exist, is the kit bashing crowd, or the people who just like to paint these models for fun. I'm sure they noticed that with Cursed City, those models ended up getting used in a ton of different kit bashes, a ton of different dioramas and other unexpected ways, so I'm sure they're conscious of that when putting out this game as well. In fact, my first thought when watching the reveal of all of the new Nurgle miniatures in this box was that this would make an amazing kit bashing box for a 40k Nurgle army. I mean, when you think about it, I'm sure they knew what they were doing here. You get a Nurgle Demon Prince, you get a couple cool looking Nurgle characters you could convert into different heroes. You get these two Cankerborn, which are just ready-made to be your Nurgle-themed Chaos spawn. You get these three Blight Templars, which are just begging to be converted into Death Guard. But I think the one that really drove it home for me is you get all of these Pox Wretches, which would make excellent proxies for Poxwalkers, which is one of my least favorite sculpts in all of 40k. Finally, you get all of these Pestigors, which are like Beastmen, but Nurgle. It's an old thing they brought back, which I think you could totally kit bash with the 40k Felgor kit to make some really cool Nurgle-themed Beastmen for the 41st millennium. It's very tempting to do this project. So yeah, I would say these conversions basically write themselves. I'm sure you're going to see other people who've probably had the same idea. You're going to see other people who do this kit bash. Like I said, when I saw this reveal, that was my first thought, like, oh, this is going to be how I do my Death Guard army. But then they revealed the rest of the Nurgle range, which, yes, much like Cursed City, they've chosen to pair this board game with a wider release for the Nurgle army as a whole in AOS. Brilliant marketing move. It effectively makes this a start collecting box with a lot of unique sculpts if you do want to start Nurgle in AOS. And that is, I think, the third demographic they're aiming for with this box, which is really clever, I think. They know that their games don't have the greatest track record, or at least their side games don't have the greatest track record in terms of game design, and they know that people know that. But I think the plan here is to just sell the cool looking miniatures to people like me who might want to start a 40k army, or maybe a Nurgle AOS army. Which brings us to the rest of the Nurgle reveals, which I have to say really blew me away. So to start off, we get the reveal that the Pestigors in the Darkwater box are going to be an actual new unit in the Maggotkin of Nurgle army, and they're getting their own multi-part plastic kit to go alongside the mono-pose ones from the box, much like the zombies and skeletons from Cursed City got their own multi-part, no, not really a multi-part, but they got another kit outside of that for the larger army. I think I definitely prefer the Darkwater Pestigores. They have more of a fantasy, fantastical theme and less of a zombie theme, but both of them look great and it would be fun to bash them together to make something unique. We also got the introduction of the Rot Swords, who I just love the concept of these. These are essentially the new basic Nurgle battle line for AOS, which I think they've really needed for a long time now, as there just wasn't a lot of basic guys in the Maggotkin range before this. It was mostly a lot of demons or guys riding demons. We also get a brand new unit of Nurgle guys on horses based on that really popular Harbinger of Decay, I think it was called. These look super cool as well. And finally, we get a brand new look and a brand new role for the Putrid Blight Kings, who are definitely some of my favorite sculpts on offer in this new range. I think these guys are really emblematic of the tone shift in general for this Nurgle range, as instead of just being over-the-top gross-out sculpts like a lot of the previous fantasy Nurgle stuff was, with just intestines and maggots and things all over the place, these guys, and I think all of the new Nurgle warriors, have that feel of pestilence and decay without being like an R.L. Stine Goosebumps cover. Just as a side note, a huge part of why I haven't painted a lot of Nurgle models in the past is this reason. I've always thought their aesthetic was cool, but some of the models just feel way too gross for me to paint. But I think something they've really nailed in this range, both with the Darkwater Nurgle sculpts and with the Nurgle line in general, is they're riding that line between pestilence and just sort of like an odd regal beauty, which I think they've just done a great job here. I'm excited to paint some of these. It really has me tempted to dive back into AOS, especially if they made one of these things a spearhead, so I could try out the new spearhead game mode. So we'll have to see how expensive all of these things are, but I'm definitely tempted. Oh, and I guess Festus got a new sculpt as well. I don't really care about these over-detailed boss sculpts, to be honest. Next up, they showed off a whole bunch of Warhammer Plus stuff, but I'm in Canada, so I can't watch any of that. They also have some cool new Horus Heresy releases, some new boxes with some new Marines, some Skitarii. These all look cool, but it's not a game that I play, and I don't think I could really see myself converting any of those into any of my current armies. They follow this up with some new Legions Imperialis stuff. It looks like the Saturnine box, but just tiny. Again, not my thing, but I'm happy for those of you who do play that game. And finally, for the Horus Heresy, they did announce one more thing that I actually am quite interested in. But do you know what else I'm quite interested in? That's right. It's this video's sponsor, Squarespace. Squarespace is the all-in-one website and hosting platform for all of your website needs. And it's super easy to use. Just pick from one of their fabulously designed professional templates and then customize it to your heart's content using their very easy to understand and implement drag and drop grid system. I've been using my current Squarespace site to host a gallery of my painted miniatures, all of my painting reference documents, as well as an online store, which has been super easy to set up, maintain, add new items to, and you can sell anything on here from digital items to physical items, services, courses, sky's the limit. So if you need a website, why not check out squarespace.com today for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/Dana Howl for 10% off your very first purchase of a website or domain. And now back to our video. So the big Horus Heresy reveal that I was interested in was actually the books they're planning on releasing. Mainly, they announced this re-release of a lot of the Horus Heresy books in a more curated, linear timeline, like just the essentials kind of thing. As some of you may well know, I've been getting into Dark Angels recently. The next video on this channel will be the Dark Angels painting guide. Haven't forgotten about that. But learning about the Lion and the Dark Angels has really got me thinking, like, should I be reading some of the Horus Heresy books? involving the Dark Angels, but I haven't really known where to start, so I thought this idea of a curated 12-book set giving you just the essentials of the Horus Heresy is really appealing for someone like me who's kind of intimidated by the 50-plus books in that series. So anyway, I thought this was a cool idea. I'll definitely be picking up that first one if it's not too expensive. Next up, we've got some old world reveals. Well, it's technically just one reveal and an associated book. We've got a new box set and sort of an expansion set for that first cafe box set, as well as an accompanying arcane journal. These sculpts look nice enough, not really my thing. I'm not currently playing the old world. I've got enough games on the go, but I am a fan of the old world in concept, and I think it's quite interesting what they've been doing here with all of the new releases. And I just wanted to comment on it for a second because I think it's quite interesting. Mainly, I think it's really interesting what they've been doing with this game from a sculpting perspective. As between the new cafe range and all of those marauders that just got casually dropped one day on Warhammer Community, I'm kind of getting the feeling that their plan is to eventually resculpt everything from the old world range into this new sculpting style. What do I mean by new style? Well, it wasn't obvious to me at first, and I think it's only perceivable as a trend through the last few releases. As if you look at the cafe sculpts, you look at those new marauders, especially compared to like the old marauders or even current chaos stuff in AOS, you can see they're going for a more naturalistic look in terms of the proportions. And I get the feeling this is probably to set them apart as sort of a more historical range versus the more over-the-top exaggerated proportions of something like AOS. This makes a lot of sense, especially I think if you consider Horus Heresy versus 40k. You kind of see the same thing. Horus Heresy is treated more like a historical game, and you can sort of see how AOS, if AOS is the modern equivalent, the old world is kind of AOS historicals. I think it's a really smart business move to help set the two lines apart, but anyway, I just wanted to mention that as I thought it was quite interesting, and I was wondering if anyone else has noticed that as well, or if I'm way off on this observation. Beyond this, we got a few new sculpts for Necromunda, including a few really cool new Rock Raiders sculpts, but let's not kid ourselves, what you really want to hear me talk about is the new 40k stuff. So there is a ton to discuss here. We were, of course, all expecting this big end of edition campaign to get announced at this show, and that is exactly what we got. I guess the 500 Worlds Necron leak turned out to be real. I really don't like these leaks. It takes the wind out of all of these reveals. Whoever's doing these leaks, please stop. It makes all of these new reveals so much more boring. Just let it get revealed in a show. Thanks. But before we talk about the new campaign stuff, let's first look at some of the individual units they revealed. The new Space Dwarf looks cool, the new Tyranid Prime looks cool. I don't have either of those armies, so not really for me. But I did want to draw attention to these new Tau character battle suits they introduced, because I think it's moving into some really interesting new design space for the Tau. I'm not a Tau player myself, but I am happy for anyone who gets to pick these up and paint them, including probably my friend Ben, who is our local Tau player. Okay, so with all that out of the way, let's talk 500 Worlds. 500 Worlds is the new end of edition campaign book series, similar to Arcs of Omen from the previous edition. And what was the one before that called? Psychic Awakening, Pariah Nexus? I forget. But anyway, we're used to this pattern by now. We get a series of books near the end of every Warhammer edition. The books are usually named after main characters who are currently in the spotlight of whatever the most current storyline is. And the general pattern is that we get some new sculpts. We get the rules for these sculpts in the books. We also get some new lore and storyline stuff in these books, which progresses the narrative from the previous edition to the new one. And alongside this, we usually get combo boxes with minor discounts that let them liquidate some of their old stock before the new edition comes out. So whether you like or hate these end of edition campaign book things, you have to admit they did a really smart thing here from a marketing perspective. And mainly what I'm talking about here is centering the first book around Titus, who is the protagonist from the really popular Space Marine games. Space Marine 2 came out, what was that, last year? And I was extremely surprised there was no tie-in products in the miniatures range. Sure, we got that one thing, but it's just really cool to see the characters and maybe some of the storylines from those video games coming over into the mainline miniatures game. This is something I have always felt they should be doing more of. You know, if you own a multimedia property, these sorts of crossovers really make fans happy. They convert people from the video games over to the miniatures games. Anyway, I just feel very proud of GW for this. This was a killer marketing move. I think a lot more people are going to buy into this new campaign because it's got their favorite Space Marine guy in it. So anyway, super cool to see this here. They've put Titus into a main role in this new storyline. I guess Gilliman has tasked him with retaking the 500 worlds of Ultramar, and we get this really cool set of miniatures representing Titus's crew, some of which I believe are characters from the games and some of which are brand new characters. I'm not going to buy this set as I don't really have attachment to the Ultramarines, and it's probably going to be an expensive set, more expensive than I could justify using it for just a kit bash or something. But these miniatures all look super cool. I love that a lot of Titus's command staff are just regular humans. It's always so cool to see regular humans and Space Marines in like the same army. It actually makes the Marines seem like these giants. So I just love it. Super cool unit. Love it so much. Good job, GW. We also get potentially a non-binary character here in the form of Lucia Vestha. And I usually wouldn't go out of my way to speculate like this. There's nothing about this on the GW website, but it was a really weird moment in the presentation when the announcer was like, called Lucia they, and then backpedaled and was like, this person. Could have just been some sort of error. It could have been that the announcer just honestly didn't know Lucia's gender, but for me, this is going to be my new favorite canon non-binary 40k character who's not half robot or an alien or a demon. Thanks. Speaking of non-gendered pronouns, we also get a brand new character for the Necrons with its pronouns, and this is going to be the big new villain, I guess, for the Necrons as part of this campaign. Its name is Necrosaur, a Mentor, who seems to be a rather legendary figure in the Necron mythology. They talked about this sort of myth that Amentar might be the origin of the Destroyer Curse, and that memories of it were perhaps wiped from the Necrons' collective psyche by maybe someone like the Silent King. They talk a little bit about how Amentar's agenda is to assemble the various shards of the Catan. I don't know a whole lot about this, but I believe the Catan is like a big god that got turned into shards. Am I right about that? Probably could have done more research on this. But anyway, the Nightbringer is one of these shards, and we get a brand new sculpt for the Nightbringer, and this would have been, again, a really cool surprise if not for leakers. Why do you do this to us? But anyway, I just think that's a really cool storyline for the Necrons, that Necrosaur Amentar is going around collecting these shards and trying to reassemble them. That's a fun villain motivation. We also get a new combo box for the Necrons called Oops All Destroyers, which is exactly what it sounds like. Again, this is something I feel quite tempted to purchase, as a lot of these units are units that I was already looking at for expanding my Necron army. Pretty much every unit in this box, from what I can tell, is doing pretty well in the meta right now, and I don't have most of these, so I think they would be a great addition to my Indomitus Necron force. Again, a very tempting purchase, but is it more tempting than the new Nurgle stuff? Is that more tempting than finishing my Dark Angels army or doing more orcs? It's a constant struggle being a Warhammer fan. The campaign book itself also looks quite interesting, as unlike the previous campaign books, it's not a single hardcover, but instead a slipcover with 4 smaller volumes inside. I'm very curious to see why they did this. I wonder if it was either a cost-saving measure, or maybe I know at least one of these things folds out into a big map. Be very curious to see what the final product looks like, and if there was really a cause for doing this. One of these is the lore book. One of them is just the new detachments for the Ultramarines and the Necrons, or maybe Space Marines and Necrons, I forget. One of the books is called Dread Incursions, and it's apparently support for the boarding actions format, which can also be combined with the 4th book, which is the campaign mode that this book introduces. This new campaign supplement, which is called War on the Vespator Front, apparently includes a big fold-out map, which I heard might have stickers on it, like a Gloomhaven or a Legacy game like that. That sounds pretty cool. I love stickers. Anyway, it all sounds quite fun, and I'll definitely be picking up this book if it's reasonably priced. I don't know if my playgroup will end up playing it, as we already have a Crusade campaign going on, but I'd definitely be interested to read it and let you know my thoughts on it. And that's about it. Do you see what I mean when I said there was a lot to talk about? Again, I'm not planning on doing these news videos as a regular thing, but occasionally there's just these juicy topics which I really want to weigh in on, or ask you what you think, and you can let me know down in the comments what you think about all these new reveals. I'm quite excited, obviously. I've got at least 5 things from this reveal show which I hope to buy at some point in the future, but it's all going to depend on how much time I have, how much money I have, and what the timing is on when these all get released. Hopefully they don't all get released at once. Thanks as always for watching. Stay tuned for the next video on the channel, which will be the Dark Angels painting video that I promised, and I will see you in the next video.